Well, what a momentous 24 hours in this election cycle, in this post-election cycle. Last time I spoke to you folks, we were discussing how the two Republican members of the Wayne County Canvassing Board were threatened and harassed into certifying the election results out of that county, and things were looking pretty grim for old Donald Trump. Not only were they, themselves doxxed in the middle of the meeting while the meeting was still going on, and harassed and, essentially told by their fellow board members that, hey, everyone in the world knows that you're a racist now. Do you really want to live this way, or do you want to reverse your vote? Not only that, their children were doxxed. It was a disgusting display, and it was, it was very pessimistic yesterday after all that went down. It really did feel like, I didn't know at that point, how you would come back from that. And I still stand by everything I said yesterday. I don't think that what I said yesterday, that anything's changed. But it does look like people are fighting back. And it looks like the Trump campaign, Rudy Giuliani, Sidney Powell, and Jenna Ellis have made it clear that this is far from over. And in fact, today, in their press conference, most of what we heard was things that have been going around for a while, but hearing it all laid out, especially what Sidney Powell had to say in this format, making it clear that this is our legal argument moving forward. This is, we're going to present evidence to this effect in court. That, I think, for at least Trump supporters, it was probably very reassuring, and for for everyone else, for people like me who are more interested in an abstract sense, not necessarily just because I want to see Trump reelected. Although I think that'd be an okay thing. I would prefer that probably to Joe Biden. Although I've discussed before, there's pros and cons to each of them. But from an election integrity standpoint, I think that it is crucial that these lawsuits go forward, and I think it's very encouraging to hear that they are putting up such a strong fight. Now, the media, questioning them, I think, somewhat fairly, was asking Giuliani and Powell and Ellis to share with them, what evidence they have up their sleeve, what they plan to present in court concretely. And as much as I, too, want to see all that, I think that Giuliani had a very good response, and that is that there were about 10 indictments which he's made public, or not indictments, affidavits which he's made public, where witnesses go on the record and allege that fraud occurred and that they witnessed it, and he says that they have something like 100 people total, but most of those don't want to come forward. And it's it's essentially this is their problem that they have with a lot of their evidence, is that they can't show their cards yet because of like what just happened in Michigan, where those people and their children, they were threatened, their lives were threatened. Their attorneys who just quit, they had their livelihoods threatened, they had their children threatened, they themselves, their lives were threatened. And Giuliani, I think, somewhat appropriately pinned that all on the media, and said that, because of the way that you people are covering this, we really can't share much with you, because anyone involved in this case who's trying to help us get to the truth of the matter is going to be destroyed by you people. Their lives will be ruined, and so, that's a pretty good reason to me to keep your cards close to the vest, as frustrating as that is for me as someone who's following along with this, and I want to know what's going on. But given, what's gone on in the last week or so, lawyers resigning, because of pressure, public officials having to recant their or change their decisions, make decisions based on the mob harassing them. All these things, it's made me to the point where, okay, I'm willing to cut him some slack here and say, what, let's just let you make your case in court, and if anything comes of this, then I'll judge you then. Or if nothing comes of it, then again, I'll judge you then. But I'm not going to judge you now for not putting everything, the solid evidence out there. He's saying he has the evidence, that it's there, it's just he can't share what all the witnesses say, because they don't want to be doxxed and have their lives turned upside down. And so the case that Giuliani made about ballot stuffing and things like that, the 4 a.m. dump where you had a bunch of ballots coming in that were just for Biden. All that seemed reasonable to me. It seemed possible. The stuff that to me was much more fantastical, which again may very well be true. We don't know yet, hasn't been adjudicated in court, was what Sidney Powell was presenting about, this thread about Dominion and all that. What Sidney Powell is alleging in this press conference, and that this is the legal argument she's going to make in court, apparently, is that the Dominion voting systems were, eminently hackable, and she believes were used to manipulate the official vote tallies. Essentially, she said that there was an algorithmic level of corruption, and that a Dominion voting, machine doesn't necessarily count a vote one for one. You can set in variables to count votes, to make them each value more or less than one. And so, for example, she said, you can have it so that Trump ballots count for 0.75 and Biden ballots count for 1.25. And so obviously, if you overweight the value of a Biden ballot and underweight the value of a Trump ballot, well, that's going to rig the election in Biden's favor. And so Powell explains the 4 a.m. dump in Michigan, the infamous 4 a.m. dump of 30,000 ballots all for Biden. She claims, and she didn't act like she was speculating. She was making affirmative claims, arguing that what this was a result of was that the algorithm that they had created did not guarantee a Biden victory, and that essentially Trump's genuine victory was more overwhelming than they had anticipated. And so therefore they had to stop in the middle of the night, stop the counting, and then bring in all these Biden ballots in the middle of the night, which, according to Giuliani, some of which were counted, 3 to 5 times, just run back through the same voting machine over and over again. That was on top of, the fraud of underweighting Trump ballots and overweighting Biden ballots. Now, obviously, they did not present any concrete forensic evidence of this, and they did not present witnesses who could testify that this happened. But again, at this point, based on what they're saying about how their people do not want to come forward, for obvious reasons, I think, very reasonable that a witness would not want to be made public with everything that's gone on recently. If they're saying this, they're either total sociopaths, total liars, just making things up, or they have witnesses who allege this. And yes, witness testimony is admissible in court. That is evidence. It is a form of evidence. Now, obviously, would the best evidence would probably be digital forensics, and that's not a field that I'm well versed in. I don't know if they were somehow able to get a court to grant them the power to subpoena access to those Dominion voting machines, if they could somehow examine the code to see if they'd been programmed to do something like that. But again, these are explosive claims, and at the very least, even if this all turns out to be nonsense, the Trump campaign is not giving up. And this does not assuage necessarily my skepticism that I have articulated over the past few days. I'm still very concerned that they cannot find lawyers to represent them. I'm not saying that is for the reason the media says. The media, the narrative is that Trump's lawyers are dropping like flies, as one of the reporters who questioned Giuliani during his press conference said. Do you have any concerns that your reporters, or that your lawyers and your cases are dropping like flies? They're being dismissed. The lawyers are quitting because they can't find any evidence to support your case, and so they can't argue for you in court. That's total nonsense from what I've seen. Because first of all, lawyers will argue a case that they have no evidence for, for the most part. I mean, they're ridiculous cases that get argued by lawyers all the time because lawyers like to be paid money. So if you pay them money, they'll make an argument. But if you threaten their livelihood, if you threaten their lives, if you threaten the lives of their children, if you threaten their careers, then a lawyer's going to back down. And so when that's happening, I think that is very clearly to me the reason why the Trump campaign is struggling to retain legal representation. I don't think it's because necessarily that they lack evidence. I just don't hold lawyers in that high of esteem. I don't believe that lawyers would drop a case because they feel like that they are undermining the integrity of our elections. That's nonsense. And as Giuliani pointed out, these lawsuits that we're hearing about that are being dismissed are lawsuits brought by private citizens. That lawsuit in Michigan last week that was dismissed, to where the judge was, he was just blistering in his opinion, essentially saying that the affiants were completely not credible, that the defendants' affiants were, had sterling reputations. It did everything he could to try and poison the well on any future legal action that these people might take, even though he dismissed them, on a somewhat of a technicality. From what I understand, I'm not a lawyer, but that seemed to be the general consensus. But again, that was not a Trump campaign lawsuit. And as Giuliani said, these cases are being dismissed based on lack of standing. That's not a lack of evidence. That's a lack of standing, meaning you were not, an aggrieved party, and so you don't have the right to sue over that issue. The Trump campaign is not going to have any problem suing after an election, claiming, that there were some problems with the election, finding, or with the court, declaring that they have a lack of standing. If anyone has standing to challenge the results of an election in court, it's one of the campaigns. Again, in these same states, Jill Stein challenged the results of the election. Now, the language used in this press conference was beyond strong. Strong is an understatement. Giuliani made it clear, which he said before, but again, every time that they keep saying this, the longer this goes on, it's one thing to say the day after the election when not all the states have been called by the media yet to say, oh no, Donald Trump won in a landslide, just you wait. And then if the results all came in and the New York Times said, Biden wins 306 electoral votes, then if at that point, Giuliani stopped saying Trump won in a landslide, that'd be about normal. But the fact that he's continued for these 2 weeks after the election now, to continue to say, no, Trump definitely won. Same thing Sidney Powell's saying. They're saying this election was 100% won by the incumbent president, and the election was stolen, and we're going to prove it in court. They're making it clear that if the results of this election are not overturned in due time, if these results are certified by the safe harbor date, which is December the 8th, and the Electoral College meets and declares Joe Biden to be the president-elect of the United States, that the position of the Trump legal team is that is totally illegitimate. And that's the message that they're presenting to their supporters. This is unprecedented in recent American history. Now, you could say that, well, okay, in 2000, the Democrats didn't really recognize Bush, but that was kind of an underhanded thing. They're like, well, selected, not elected. And that was a popular slogan, but it wasn't necessarily something to where you had prominent Democratic politicians and Gore's legal team literally saying that this election was 100% stolen and that Bush is not the president by any means. They were not that strong in their declarations. And the same thing in 2016. You didn't have as many, I don't think, even then with the Russiagate stuff. I don't think that you had prominent Democratic politicians and prominent, people so closely associated with Hillary, for example, coming out and saying this election was 100% stolen. I'm the rightful president, and Trump is totally fake. I mean, we came close to this, but I think this is definitely an escalation over 2016. The claims that the Democrats made. Because the claims that the Democrats made, even though the media came very close to saying essentially what Sidney Powell was saying, that the voting machines were hacked in Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania to throw the election to Trump, and that potentially hacked by Russia. That was not those claims were not made by respectable official people. That was something that like weekend anchors on CNN or daytime anchors would allege in interviews with, Jeffrey Toobin and stuff. The mainstream Russiagate narrative was that Russia essentially bought Facebook ads, like $12,000 in Facebook ads, and they were able to use those ads and target certain areas to, I guess, help get out the vote for Trump. And that Trump may or may not have been aware that, of the Russians being involved in hacking Hillary's emails and releasing those and again swaying people that way. It was always the Russiagate stuff seemed to focus a lot on disinformation, or as they called it, saying that the Russians were smearing Hillary and that's why people didn't vote for her and they voted for Trump. But this is something much more extreme. Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell are not alleging that people were tricked into voting for Joe Biden. They're not saying that. They're saying flat out that people didn't vote for him. And in Georgia today, there are affidavits being published alleging that you had ballots that were printed out that had no creases in them, supposed mail-in ballots that clearly were never put in an envelope and mailed. They didn't have any creases on the page. They were perfectly flat, and they had perfectly bubbled in circles that looked like they had just come out of a printer, as if they just printed all these ballots, but with the holes, or with the dots pre-filled in for Joe Biden. And I don't believe they discussed this at the press conference, but this is something new. I believe Sidney Powell might have brought this up about Georgia, because she mentioned something about Lynn Wood. I believe this is a part of Lynn Wood's lawsuit there. And so I guess this has gone on a pretty long time, but things really turned around, I think, last night. The momentum clearly shifted because, one, the Wayne County canvassing board members, the two Republicans, reversed their stance and said that essentially that they made that agreement under duress. Now, I'm not exactly sure how easy it will be to reverse the certification now that they have come out and recanted and said that they did that under duress. But I mean, certainly if it was a legal contract that they had signed and they stated that it was under duress, I mean, that contract would be null and void. You don't have a legal contract if one party signs under duress. But I don't think that this necessarily amounts to a legal contest, but it's something that will have to be determined by a judge. But again, I think any reasonable judge would look at the evidence that these people, their lives were threatened, that they were accosted by their colleagues, and were told basically that they had no choice. I think that a judge could very well overturn that certification. Although, in fact, perhaps simply them recanting has overturned the certification, because in the press conference today, Giuliani talked about their Michigan lawsuit, their lawsuit to block the certification of the Wayne County results, that they dropped that case because they said, well, they came out and they said it and they didn't certify, so it's not certified anymore. So I'm not entirely sure about that. And also, the Michigan Secretary of State has said that it seems like they're heading towards a full audit. Now, so did the Georgia Secretary of State. Some questions still up in the air about what exactly that will entail. But things are happening in Michigan, and of course you have the Trump-funded recount in Milwaukee and Dane County, Wisconsin. And that Giuliani seems to be confident. The recount rules in Wisconsin are tough enough and thorough enough to where they actually will be able to identify some fraudulent votes, which again shouldn't be too hard based on what I've seen, to where they have the ridiculously high turnout levels in certain precincts in Milwaukee. Again, this was a problem that Jill Stein ran into during her recount, that they were discovering that they had more votes than voters, and that the recount was actually helping Donald Trump. It was increasing his margins in Wisconsin. And so that's where we're at today. Wisconsin, Michigan, Georgia, and of course Pennsylvania all appear to be in play to me. Nevada, I should add that too. There you have the pending legal action there. Giuliani talked about that they think they're going to bring suits in Arizona and perhaps even New Mexico or Virginia. I think that those are all... I don't think that they'll waste their time on that until they've gone through the other ones that are, more winnable. But I mean, the fact that they're looking at it in that many states says to me that, again, this is not going to be over anytime soon. Trump is not penning his concession speech, and they, to me, are not acting like they lost. What I watched today was not a press conference by a team in retreat. These are not people who are ready to give up. So with that said, if you gained anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and sharing this video. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe, because I do upload every day and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.